Hello, Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. A disaster in the Gulf this week reminded us of how quickly the weather can turn, particularly over a sea, and how dangerous its impact can be. The search for missing crew members of the lift boat Seacor Power continued. We'll examine that story as well as our weekly COVID update, plus discouraging news about the city budget, repairing city streets, the latest from the legislature, and the last days of the Congressional runoff. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Curt Sprang, news anchor and reporter, WGNO TV Channel 26, Jeff Adelson, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and Tyler Bridges, political reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. First, we're going to go over to Errol, and let's get our COVID update. How is it looking for us these days?
Well, over the last week, the news hasn't gotten any better, but significantly it hasn't gotten much worse either. It's pretty much held its own. Every Friday, the Public Affairs Research Council issues a report, a lot of it based on state health data. And the positivity rate, and they do it over 3-day periods, has pretty much remained the same across the state. There are like 4 areas where there's been a little bit of a spike, and those are the Lafayette, Shreveport, Monroe, and North Shore. So it's curious that 3 of the big cities had a little bit of the spike. In the North Shore, which has a population which is probably greater than any of those cities, and so that's where we saw the most increase, but nothing really high. In terms of overall, there have been like over 1 million vaccines or vaccinations in Louisiana. The group that's getting the highest rate is what you'd expect, the people who are 70 years old and over, and they make up about 31.5% of the vaccinations that are completed. So it goes on. There's still all kinds of stories of new efforts. There was something announced today out of Baton Rouge. There's going to be a big federal effort to do a maximum vaccination thing. But the curious story that came out this week was when an executive for Pfizer raised the possibility that there may need to be a 3rd booster shot. Now they're examining it, they're talking about it, and it sounds like if that happens, it might be a year away. But they also set out the possibility that even after that 3rd booster shot, maybe, we don't know, maybe it'll be an annual thing, I guess, like the flu shot is.
Right.
And so we're going to be hearing more about this. Beyond that, just going around town, you're starting to sense people getting a little bit more liberated, people doing things that they haven't done in over a year and really enjoying that. So I think it's a little bit better feeling in the community now.
Yeah, I think folks are definitely feeling a bit more relaxed. I mean, you just sort of tend to once you have the 2 shots or the 1 from Johnson & Johnson, which leads me to the question for you. What is this doing now to our vaccination rate now that we see this pause on the J&J shots?
That has disappointed all the people who were kind of cheering on the vaccination rate because it slowed them down, and so that's been a bit of a setback. But if anybody wants a vaccination, it's not hard to do. I mean, they're easily available. So if anybody has any hard luck stories about, couldn't get there, they wouldn't let me in, you can get them. And there's a surplus in a lot of places throughout the state.
You mentioned that the Pfizer had said it looks like it's a good chance of having to have a 3rd shot to sort of boost the first 2 shots anywhere from 6 months to a year from now. But, while we're hearing him say that, it's something that we really kind of heard all along, that this could be a possibility that we would have to continue to be inoculated.
Yeah, but we've heard so much during the past year. Like the first time I heard it, I said, that's not going to happen. But things are happening. And so, it looks like they're saying it more frequently now.
Yeah, that just sort of points out that there's still a lot of unknowns with this, and we're still learning. Okay, E, thanks a lot. I mean, bottom line is still be cautious, still play it safe, wear masks, et cetera. All righty. Curt, the big story, of course, here in this area, well, really, it's made headlines all over the world, really. It's this tragedy that's happened in the Gulf. We know now definitely there are 2 confirmed dead, 6 rescued out of 19 people that were on this lift boat. Why don't you sort of give us a background of what happened and where are we now with it?
Well, this thing started Tuesday afternoon around 4:30. The Coast Guard says that they received a call from someone who they call a Good Samaritan who radioed in and said that this lift boat, which by the way is kind of like a turbocharged barge, if you will. It's got a motor and perhaps cranes and other equipment on it. It has 4 long posts at each corner that can lift it out of the water and make it become a platform standing alone in the water. And around 4:30 in the afternoon, it overturned in about 55 feet of water. And it sits there now, and the search is on to try and find the people on board. There were 19 people on board that boat at the time. 2 bodies have been recovered since. The second last night, I believe, was the time that it was announced today. The captain of the boat, his body was the first one found, and that was Tuesday. Also, 6 people rescued, and then the remaining now 11 crew members are still missing. The Coast Guard, we've had horrible weather here, but you know what, it's been horrible there, even worse perhaps there. And the Coast Guard is trying to get divers out there, and they've had some success. They say that they have tapped on the hull of the boat, but have not received any response. They say that they have thermal imaging that could reveal the locations of 2 people, but they say they're still evaluating that. And meanwhile, the families, they would like more information from Sea Corps about why this boat went out. It went out about 3 hours before it overturned, and they want to know why it went out in these conditions. Although if you talk to people, the Coast Guard will even tell you that they said these weather conditions really snuck up on everybody. And there's been a lot of talk about this wake low, is what it's called. Wake not weak, but wake low, that caused so much of the wind problems that we saw here and then all the way down through southeast Louisiana. But it's still not confirmed if that phenomenon itself actually caused it, or it was just the conditions, because they were looking at 7 to 9 foot seas, well, winds at maybe 90 miles per hour. So it's a tragedy, and we just don't know how long it's going to take for them to get divers inside that barge or that lift boat, which is on its side currently in about 55 feet of water.
And I know everybody's hoping, and certainly the families and you know, the close friends of these missing guys are just hoping that there could be some way that they have survived this. There could be air pockets or something in there that could have kept them alive. And as we are having this discussion at this point, we just really don't know. We're certainly praying for it. And, you know, you mentioned this weather system that crept up on us. And here locally, there were trees that were uprooted and roof damage and everything. This is something that really crept up on everybody.
And did indeed. And again, this wake low, I'd never heard. I've been in the business for a long time. I've never heard wake low before. But I should also caution everybody. And I spoke with our chief meteorologist at WGNO, Hank Allen, and he said, while yes, that caused all kinds of problems for people in southeast Louisiana, this unusual wake low, he's not convinced that that is the actual phenomenon that created the conditions that caused this boat to turn onto its side. So then family members say that they're hearing that even once divers are able to make entry into this boat, it could still be days before they're able to very systematically make their way through each and every compartment of it. So even if they get great conditions, and weather conditions are expected to improve in the coming days, it still could be many more days after that before they're able to completely search this boat that's overturned on its side.
And while this vessel is a sizable vessel, it's a big vessel, and like you said, there are a lot of compartments that would have to be searched. It's really not built to handle that kind of weather that did hit. Whether it's the wake low that caused it or not, it was still some bad weather out there. No,
it's terrible weather. And part of the investigation, the Coast Guard says this, is going to be to find out what the conditions were like at 1:30 in the afternoon when the captain, who is now among the dead, the captain elected to take that boat out. And it was supposed to go about 25 miles, I believe, off of Port Fourchon for some work that it was going to handle. We haven't heard the exact nature of what it was supposed to do, but at this point, they're still trying to determine exactly what the conditions were like and what the crew and captain knew about those conditions and at what point Tuesday afternoon.
Curt, one description I heard, it was more of a spectator's description, described it as like a baby hurricane. Is that an accurate description, or is it more like something else, like what is it?
Well, I think that the wind speeds could have very well reached hurricane or more force winds. Whether it was straight line or whether it was more of a circular effect, I just don't know about that. But probably more of a straight line phenomenon. But just the same, it's not only difficult for this boat, for a lift boat, those conditions. It's difficult for any boat to be out there in those conditions.
Right. I mean, we've heard reports, have seen reports of other boat operators, captains of boats, of shrimping vessels or whatever, saying who they were out there already and they had to fight their way through the system. It was the worst they've ever seen, and they really didn't know if they were going to make it or not.
There's frightening video. We have some of a shrimp boat captain on our website, and the bow of the boat is dipping into the waves. And folks, let me tell you, if you're ever on a boat and you're dipping the bow of the boat into the water because it is so rough, you are in a dangerous, dangerous situation.
But when we should say that the Coast Guard immediately rescued, was it 6 individuals?
Six individuals were pulled from the water immediately, and one body, the captain. Then we had 12 missing, and we have since found at least one other body.
11 missing. Okay.
So now we have 11 missing at last count.
Yeah. All right, Curt, really, we're just praying and hoping for the best for these guys and for their families. Thanks a lot, Curt. Tyler, we are getting to the last week now of that congressional runoff. So what's the latest on that?
Sure. The election is still going on with the early voting today, Friday, and then Saturday will be the last day, and then the election is April 24th. But on Friday, there was the first of there will be 4 debates between Karen Carter Peterson and Troy Carter. They're both Democratic state senators from New Orleans. Folks will remember that Troy Carter led in the March 20th primary with 36%, and Karen Carter Peterson finished with 23%. So, and the debate today was on the radio. I would say, having listened to it, that the 2 candidates actually seem to agree on a number of positions. But when they do disagree, Karen Carter Peterson will take a position to the left of Troy Carter.
Mm-hmm. This has really been a hard-fought race, and also, of course, some negative campaigning and stuff going on, prompting Carter at one point to say he's not a Trumper. Right.
He's pretty upset by the effort by Karen Carter Peterson to tie him to President Trump. This is probably something, by the way, we're going to see in Democratic primaries over the next several years. But the truth is, I think that their voting records are pretty similar in the state Senate, where they both served for the past 5 years. Again, Karen Carter Peterson, when she differs with Senator Carter, that she will almost always take a position to the left. She favors the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, a $20 per hour minimum wage, whereas Troy Carter favors a $15 per hour minimum wage. He favors the slightly more moderate, the Biden position on health care, which includes a public option, and also he says with the Green New Deal that he favors it as a framework. But Karen Carter Peterson, as you mentioned, has been very aggressive in sending out mailers trying to tie Troy Carter with President Trump, and Troy Carter says no way.
Turnout, what's expected?
Yeah, I got to say that's disappointing. The turnout in the primary was about 18%, and John Couvion in Baton Rouge is running the numbers. He is expecting about an 11 or 12% ultimate turnout, and I just wish people would take their democratic civic duty more seriously. You know, people have died for the right to vote, and even if you're Republican, at least choose the lesser of the two evils, as it were. I mean, the person who wins this race will probably hold this seat for a long time, so I would just hope people will get engaged and get up to speed on the candidates and turn out.
How will endorsements impact turnout, do you think?
It's not, well, it doesn't look like turnout's going to be very large, but Karen Carter Peterson clearly has the endorsements of the sort of more progressive elements of the Democratic Party, particularly nationally, including Stacey Abrams, the Georgia political leader. Troy Carter has endorsement of the mayor of Baton Rouge, Mayor Sharon Weston Broome, also the Orleans Parish District Attorney Jason Williams. Troy Carter also has the endorsement of all 8 black state senators who are not in this race. And also worth noting that Karen Carter Peterson has the endorsement of the candidate who finished 3rd in the primary, Gary Chambers Jr. out of Baton Rouge, is a Baton Rouge social justice advocate and activist.
The thing about turnout, The way districts are drawn, they're each divided into 1/6 of the state, and this district was drawn to be a black majority district, and it's mostly Orleans Parish, and then it goes upriver. There's a part of it is Baton Rouge, but not much. And I could see the people in Baton Rouge looking at this and seeing two candidates from New Orleans, who most of them probably never heard of, and not being too excited about this race, especially as you say, there's not a lot of big difference between them on the issues. And so there's not a lot of incentive there.
Well, I would say the incentive is that we should be doing our democratic civic duty by being engaged and voting. And again, all sorts of people have lost their lives going back in this country's history. And I personally don't understand why people don't take a few minutes to get up to speed and do their civic duty, either for early voting or on April 24th.
1 day left of early voting, and then the race is on the 24th, right?
Yes, and
Election day.
the winner will replace Cedric Richmond, who is now working for Joe Biden.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tyler. Jeff, over to you. And the city budget. The city of New Orleans we're talking about, was really, really hit by this pandemic and lockdown and the loss of tax revenue. But they're getting some money from the feds, too, from the federal government, the stimulus plan. Is that going to help?
Well, it's going to help, but city officials are really trying to rein in expectations on what the city's going to be able to do with the money it's going to get from the American Rescue Plan, which is the coronavirus relief bill. So New Orleans is actually in a really good position nationwide, actually. It's getting some of the most money for a city of its size, about $377 million as part of the package. But what city officials say is that it's going to take up until 2025 before city revenues recover back to where they were before the pandemic and all the restrictions that cut into sales tax, the incredible drop off in tourism that hurt the city revenues, that sort of thing. So they're really trying to, tamp down on the idea that this is a windfall that's immediately going to be usable to spend on whatever priorities people think are there right now, and saying this is money that has to really be spread out over the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And like you said, the city of New Orleans is really getting a lot compared to the other cities in the state. I mean, quite a bit more.
Yeah, I believe it's about 3 times as much as Baton Rouge, which is the next highest. All of that money is being distributed based on a formula that takes into account a variety of factors, including economic factors and poverty and those sorts of things. New Orleans has a particularly high amount of money that it's going to be receiving as a result of that, which again is good. But again, there's this caution that's being urged by Mayor Cantrell's administration about just how much they're going to be able to do with that. Right now, a lot of the priorities are the mayor's already lifted furloughs, which were in place for city employees, reinstated some overtime, and they're looking to pay back some loans they took out in case they were to run short on cash because of all the revenue shortages.
So they're starting to see, I would assume, an uptick in tax revenues since we're starting to see things open up a bit more, but it's just not going to be enough to cover us in the immediate, right? Is that what you're saying, basically?
That's basically what the administration's saying, yeah. And we still don't have a lot of really recent information on things like sales tax collection. That's always delayed by a few months. So things like the vaccination efforts and some of the more recent loosening of the coronavirus restrictions in the city, really, we haven't seen the effect of that publicly in terms of what we know about city revenues.
Okay, so it's going to take a while to set things straight, at least to pre-pandemic levels. All righty, Jeff, thanks a lot. Tyler, we're going to go back over to you because the Louisiana legislature is in session, and what seem to be the big key points being handled right now?
Right, the legislative session will last 60 days. It began on Monday. Perhaps one issue of interest to people is further legalization of medical marijuana. It was legalized in the state several years ago, and since then we're now at the point that anybody, for any medical reason, can get a note from their doctor to be able to use medical marijuana, but it comes in what's called a tincture. So a Republican legislator is sponsoring a measure this year that would allow people to use it in what they call the natural flower, or others might call it a bud.
Right.
But again, as a medical marijuana, and that seems to have a lot of support behind it. Also, what's going on in the legislature is an issue that would affect everybody in their pocketbook, although legislators say it would not hurt them. Everybody right now is able to, on their on their state tax return, deduct the amount of money that they pay to the federal government in income taxes. And there is a proposal that seems to have a lot of support behind it in the legislature to take away that tax break. Again, the tax break that allows people to deduct on their state taxes what they pay in federal income taxes. And in return, the top tax rate right now for people is 6%. That would go down to 4.25%, and the other rates on individual income taxes would go down as well. So what people would lose on one hand with this federal income tax deductibility, they would make up on the other hand with a lower tax rate.
And so then how does this impact state revenue?
Yeah, the plan right now for individuals is, the estimate is that the state would collect no more money, or so that would be called what is called revenue neutral. There's also a plan, again, to do the same thing on the corporate side, that corporations would lose the deduction that they get for their federal tax payments, but in return they would be able to pay a lower corporate tax rate.
So if, the money flow really is not going to change, then why do it?
Right. So the rankings in other states ding Louisiana for one reason, because of the state has a high nominal tax rate. Again, the top tax rate for corporations is 8%. The top tax rate for individuals is 6%, and that is higher than what our neighboring states have. And the theory is that people looking to come here, invest here, live here, that they see that high top tax rate, and that discourages them. And one of the reasons the state has a higher tax rate than other states is because of all the deductions that are in the tax codes. The theory is, okay, take away this popular tax break and lower the rate. It'll be revenue neutral. People will pay basically the same, but the state will look better by having that lower top tax rate. That's the theory.
So is this moving along? I mean, there are different bills on this, right? And are they getting out of committee?
Yeah, the key thing is that the Republican legislative leadership is behind this tax swap, and the governor is supportive of it too, as long as it ends up being revenue neutral. I should note also there are some Republican legislators who are trying to take away a bunch of tax breaks, for example, that businesses enjoy. Businesses are always complaining about how complicated the tax code is, but as soon as you make an effort to take away their tax break, they say, well, you can't do that. We will lose money. We won't invest here. People will lose jobs. So that's kind of an accompanying issue. It'll be interesting to see how that one plays out during the legislative session, but I would not bet against the special interest corporate lobbyists.
And if it gets through the legislature, the people are ultimately going to make the final decision, has to go to vote, right?
Right. If the effort to change the tax rates is in the Constitution, so is this deduction for the federal tax payments. So if it gets approved by the legislature, ultimately it will be the people who would decide whether yay or nay. And I should note there was an effort several years ago to make this same kind of tax swap on the corporate tax side, and the people in Louisiana rejected it.
All righty. All right. Thanks a lot, Tyler. Back over to you, Jeff. City streets. Boy, I tell you, drive around the city of New Orleans, you can hit some bumps and potholes. But things are getting improved in some areas?
Yeah, this might be a good news, bad news kind of situation. There's about $550 million worth of road construction that's ongoing right now in the city. Most of that, or large chunks of that, is being funded by the $2 billion settlement with FEMA over Katrina damage to the streets and the water and drainage infrastructure that was settled out about 6 years ago. The problem is that now there's a ton of work going on, and you're hearing a lot of complaints from residents who are saying that they're not getting proper notification from the city about what's going on, why projects are taking so long, why projects are taking longer than were expected. And these are all somewhat complicated issues. We're a city with very old infrastructure. Lots of times cities opening up streets and finding all sorts of new problems they didn't know about. But city's infrastructure officials all kind of got a bit of were criticized by the city council earlier this week for just failing to keep people up to date on where things stand on their roads, how much longer they can expect for things to be torn up in their neighborhoods.
Okay, and so this street repair is happening in various spots of the city, all over?
It's all over the place right now. This is one of the first really big pushes of this using this FEMA money, which has been delayed for years by all sorts of problems, including environmental and historic reviews that needed to be done and things like that. A lot of the focus right now is sort of the Carrollton area up through Audubon Park, Black Pearl, areas like that. But really, when you look at it, it's all over the city.
Well, the streets do need to be repaired, but it is inconvenient when they are being repaired. Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. All right, guys, it's time for other stories. Go around the table. E, start with you.
The good news that it's hard for people to speed down the streets now without breaking their axles.
That's true.
New Orleans has a rugby team. It's called the New Orleans Gold. They're in what's called Major League Rugby. People who know the game say that they got pretty good players. The team's record is 1-1-1 so far. They have a game tomorrow against the New England Free Jacks at 3 o'clock. They play in Zephyr Stadium. And when they play at Zephyr Stadium, the stadium is referred to as the Gold Mine.
All right. Go to the gold mine. All right. Curt, next, up to you.
We've had so much rain lately. So many rivers in the area are at flood stage. In fact, some of the streets, especially on the North Shore, have water that is not running off, that they have standing water on some of these streets. More rain is on the way. The good news I can tell you at this point is at least the Mississippi River in our area is looking good.
That is good. All right. Tyler, to you.
Yeah, Errol was talking about vaccination rates in the state, and my newspaper, The Advocate, we'll have a story in the Sunday paper about vaccination in the state legislature. We surveyed every single legislator to see how many of them actually have gotten the vaccination themselves.
So we have to wait till Sunday to find out?
You do.
Okay. Jeff, wrap it up with you.
I hate to go to vaccinations again, but one thing I think we should be looking out for is the rate of new vaccinations has actually been dropping in the last few weeks. And so I think it's going to be very important to watch what happens with that, whether this is a blip or whether this is a sign that the rush to get vaccinated is petering out.
Okay. All righty, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining us from sitting in your various spots. Thank you all for joining us, too. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.